we go. Hello, I'm Lindley Gooden. I'd like to welcome you to Market Force's Broadening the Role of a Bank, Delivering New Value to Customers webinar, hosted in association with Kofax from Lexmark. Now, we, believe it or not, are Generation Selfie, and we now expect banks to follow the likes of Amazon and Netflix and others in recognizing us as individuals and offering us meaningful value. And our expectations of banking will only continue to grow as new technologies such as smart TV and wearables continue to create opportunities for banks to embed themselves in our lives on a much more personal level. Now, banks will obviously have to do much more for customers to make that happen. But with technology creating so much change, there are some fundamental questions that the industry must answer right now. For example, what will the future role of the bank be? What will consumers expect from their bank? And what does the industry need to do to meet those expectations? Today, you'll be pleased to know, we're going to find out. Before we do that, let's meet our fantastic panel. First of all is Jason Bates. Hello, Jason.
Hello.
Jason is co-founder of 11FS, a new fintech company that helps established financial services players to understand, adapt, and partner in the new digital marketplace. Previously, Jason co-founded 2 new digital challenger banks in the UK. Great to see you, Jason. Next is Rob Kerner. Hello, Rob.
Hi.
Rob is the head of innovation strategy business banking at Royal Bank of Scotland. Rob leads a small team at RBS that reports into the MD of business banking and is responsible for driving innovation strategy. They set up and run prototypes with existing customers using a fintech company's platform to gain learning. Good to see you too, Rob. Next is Stephen Roberts. Hello, Stephen.
Hi.
Stephen is Strategic Transformation Director, UK Retail and Business Banking at Barclays. Stephen's 25-year-long career at Barclays has involved a range of positions, including Head of Risk, Head of Strategy and Planning, Head of Change, Chief Operating Officer, and most recently, Strategic Transformation Director. You've been busy. And last but not least is Darren Collins. Hello, Darren.
Hi, Lindley.
Darren has over 15 years of experience in the financial services sector through transformational strategies. He's enabled organizations to increase their responsiveness to customers, provide better customer service, gain a competitive advantage, and better grow their businesses while reducing operating costs. Darren is responsible for driving the strategy and providing thought leadership to global organizations in financial services. Great to see you, Darren, and thanks to Kofax from Lexmark for supporting our webinar today.
Great to be here. Thank you.
Couldn't do it without you. Okay, so over the next hour, we will be covering lots of subjects, lots of ground, and many of you will have your own questions and comments for us, so we want to give you the opportunity to put them to our panelists today, if you're watching us live. Send in your questions throughout the webinar, either using the Twitter hashtag, which is banking16, that's banking16, or the question section here, right here on our webpage. We'll get to as many as we can towards the end of our discussion today. For now, let's get started. The rise of mobile now means that banks can be with the customer 24/7. You are now in a privileged position where you could become a key part of a consumer's lifestyle, able to facilitate, serve, guide, and influence. But is that possible? And indeed, what consumers really want? If so, what could it look like? Before we focus on digital, let's kick off by focusing right here on the consumer. What do you think the role of future customers, the banks will be welcome to provide for customers? What do you think we will ask you to provide in the future? Rob?
Yeah, I think it's a great opening question. I think from the established banks, they probably think they want to be more friend advisor, but when you get down to it, customers tend to really want them to be banks first. Yeah. And if they're going to be in the friend advisor space, it better be adding value to them for their daily lives, basically.
Yeah, advisor number one, I guess, Darren. We want somebody, not necessarily the best friend, because my best friends wouldn't necessarily manage my finances properly. What do you think?
I think you're absolutely right. I think at the core of it is trust, right? When we engage with a bank, we want to ensure that we trust that organisation with our money and our financial affairs. Yeah. I think the opportunity is to build on that trust to then move to more of a financial advice, trusted advisor, if you will, and really integrate into our lives, providing timely and appropriate guidance.
And that is really important. And we've talked about this for some time. You have within the banking industry. Where does the trusted advisor end? Where does the bedrock of my life, facilitating my finances and what that delivers in my lifestyle, end? And where does the friend who's always on the end of the line to you start. Jason, what do you think about this?
I'm quite a fan of the saying that a bank should be more like a great waiter and less like a bad landlord. While I agree that sort of the existing sort of incumbents have trust, there's a trust that you're not going to lose my money. Yeah. I think there's not trust that you're going to act in my best interests all the time. Mm-hmm. And actually, that's a subtle difference. A great waiter is very subtle. They're there to not jump into the conversation in mid-restaurant, but they're there to bring you the food, but equally to guide you and to help you as you go. Yeah. So it's a very, very subtle thing.
Stephen, where do you stand on this?
I was just thinking that the trust point is fundamental. I think another point is the personalisation and the relevance. I think those things, though, will become increasingly ubiquitous across all the competitors. The bigger banks will very quickly learn from the things that Jason's team are doing, and so that there'll be a base level where we return to being a utility. I think the challenge is for us to go ahead to feel something special. But trust, it has to be there as the fundamental.
There are opportunities, there are great avenues of potential there, but once you've ironed your linen and you're ready there to wait on your client, where are the opportunities, Darren? Where do you think the areas of great opportunity, of helpful business for your customer are?
Yeah, I think as the point was made already, it's down to personalisation, having targeted products that are useful to me. Personalisation is just one part, though. It has to be timely. I don't want to be bombarded with products and services that don't make sense for me right now. Yeah. So I think the two have to go hand in hand. Personalisation, treat me as a customer, but make sure the timing is appropriate.
Yeah, Jason, having constructed and dreamt up new financial services players, you must have come with a set of ideas that allowed new opportunities to arise. There were openings that you saw as potential. How much should a bank think that is the way forward for me as an organisation? How much is it about getting that bedrock correct, getting the core services right?
I think we've had decades of delivering commodity financial products. And in fact, probably one of the biggest problems inside sort of large banks are thinking in a commodity product mindset. I sell credit cards, I service bank accounts, I do savings or unsecured personal loans. And I think the new digital challenges are looking at things slightly differently. They're turning commodity products into intelligent financial services. And so the question then becomes, what's the service gap at the moment? It's one thing to be able to give someone a balance, but what are they trying to achieve? Maybe they're trying to get from paycheck to paycheck, or maybe they're trying to buy something they want, or to save for something. There are outcomes that they want that actually they have to do a lot of work on, because the bank gives them only basic data and basic sort of transactional capabilities. So I think you see actually a lot of the challenges focusing on bridging that gap to delivering service to that end customer to help them achieve their goals.
I think building on this sort of the waiter analogy, which I really like, I've been a waiter myself for years, it struck with me, but I think the word that comes to my mind is sort of anticipation, right? So a good waiter is really, they almost they're sort of 2 steps ahead of everybody. I think back to your, the fact that we're selling them products is we're in the now, we're in the past, whereas I think some of the fintech players are really good at sort of saying what is the sort of, what anticipating the needs down the line that this will cause.
Creepy. So they're not hanging around sort of waiting to pounce on you with something.
Yeah, that's
it's
the balance.
That subtlety, as you said.
Trying to sell you the extra dessert.
Exactly.
So the thing that's really interesting to me about where the mobile banking and digital in general goes is that for a startup like Mondo, they're almost self-selecting their millennial type customer base. So for us, we're universal banks, so we have from 3-year-olds to 103-year-olds, and we have to take everybody with us. And so that how you do that in a constructive way and reach out to the customers so they feel part of this journey that's happening and not excluded is a big deal.
Yeah.
I mean, clearly you're going to try and build a picture of what sort of services you would like, as a bank, you would like to offer that the customer would like to have. You're going to build that picture. That's the only way that it can function in some ways. But this whole flip around in terms of what the customers want first, understand your customer, understand your organisation, what you can provide best, then you go. That must be a much more effective, focused and acceptable way now of doing things.
I think it is. There's also a really interesting thing how you move out of, as you described, being a purely transactional bank. What digital gives you is the opportunity to extend up the supply chain. Because the reality is people use banks because they want to do something else. I mean, apart from the store of money, they want to take a loan because they want to purchase a motorbike or a house. How you make that very easy to do is where we'll add huge amounts of value, and digital and mobile gives you that opportunity to extend out up the supply chain instead of sitting there waiting for startups to come and bite bits out of what we're doing. So there's opportunities and some challenges, but work for them.
If integration and value-added services were absolutely, if we're sort of 5 years in the future and it's all become integrated, it's all very, very helpful and successful, and we're all happy as customers and you're all happy as providers, would it look any different? Would we still have that very dutiful butler waiting in the wings? Capturing your china cup as it falls from the table. Would it still, do you think, is that the healthy way to look at the future bank?
Well, from what I see personally, I think the banks are going to have to make some tough decisions about the market and the demographic that they want to address. I mean, the challenge is, as you say, Stephen, in terms of that broad customer base, 3 to 103. You're having to provide so many options because there's so much variation there about how customers want to engage, how they want to consume your services. So I wonder, looking forward, whether some of the banks will have to make those tough decisions and reset, the part of the market that they're going after. And I think as competition increases, that will be more and more the case.
As we examine the idea of value-added services, are they the be-all and end-all? Do you think that they are the holy grail that we should all be looking for, or are they just? Do you have to get the basics right first?
Yeah, I mean, again, from what I see, the be-all and end-all, absolutely not. I think when you look across the banking sector as it stands today, many still have to get the basics right, and they have to look at providing a great customer experience in those core services. I think once you establish that, then you can add those value-added services. But the reality check for me is 70% of banks today do not provide an end-to-end digital onboarding process. So we're a long way from brilliant basics, for want of a better term. But with that in place, the value-added services, I think they are really important because that is what will create that competitive edge.
Let's say that
That
Stephen.
is what will drag customers from one bank to the next.
Yeah, Stephen, just briefly respond to that. Yeah, what do you think about that? There's a lot of nodding in the room, but
you must get the basics right.
Yeah.
Absolutely, and then you're given the remit by customers and potential customers to add the special features and make you feel, or make them feel special by the things that you do. But unless you get the basics right, then you don't even enter the game.
That's the principle, and absolutely right. It's a full-time job to get the basics right. So you'll never go anywhere if you're concentrating always on the basics. I guess, isn't that true, Rob? What do you think?
I think it goes back to sort of the brand. What do you think of a large bank? Basically, they're supposed to be serving all customers across the board. So if we come out with something that's quite sexy and cool, you may get a few nods and saying that was great, they did this new thing, but reality that it's not your brand. Your brand is the high street that takes care of everybody from soup to nuts, basically. So I think that we have to get the basics right before you put too many shiny things on the side. They're interesting, but you've missed the point of the
cherry on the cake, isn't it? But you've got to get the cake right first.
Yeah, and Barclays Launchpad is a good example of sort of allowing early adopters or people who are who want to try those things, besides the main brand, to actually have the option to do that. But I do wonder if there's that rub, there's that tension, especially I think in the UK banking sort of sector, where customers historically don't want to pay for banking, yet there's large and extensive costs associated with running thousands of staff, hundreds of branches. And so there's a tension. Where do you make that money? And when 30% of it is from unauthorized overdraft fees or hidden forex charges, it sets up. And I don't blame anyone for for a customer that doesn't want to pay anything to make that happen. But it does create an interesting tension around when you're creating intelligent services that help people manage their money better, which means less unauthorized overdrafts. That can actually work against your business model, which gets interesting very quickly, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Let's just talk partnership for a moment, and then we'll ask you again to get involved. We really want your points with us today, your thoughts, your comments, your questions. You can get in touch on Twitter if you're watching us live. Banking16, Banking16 is your Twitter hashtag. Get in touch also on the webpage here. Just send us your thoughts, your questions, your comments, and we'll respond to them in the last sort of 15 minutes of the program. Let's just talk partnership for a moment. How important is partnership, fintech, getting the best ideas from outside your organization into your organization? Briefly, Rob, what do you think about this?
I think it's that, along with the PSD2, is going to sort of start to normalize the business model a bit. So really, you've got a B2B business model here, where the larger banks are the distribution partners, really. And if you think of the fintech players as the R&D and the products that are coming back through. So in a consumer market, you'd have kind of trade shows, for lack of a better word, and you have rules how people engage with each other and how deals are done and how people are testing. And I think that needs to start to fall into place. We're still now having too much sort of everybody's dealing with everybody slightly differently. Some people are investing, some people are doing this. So I imagine if I was a sort of a small startup, having to deal with all the banks completely separately in a different way is quite tiring. And for the larger banks, how do I sort of scan this horizon and do something in a efficient way as well, too? You can't be sort of talking to everybody because I saw a shiny thing this week.
The benefits are pretty clear, aren't they? If the working together can be ironed out as quickly as possible. We'll get into this more because we really need to talk about taking those ideas in, partnering with organizations that have the great tech, the great ideas. But Darren, what do you think about this? I mean, is this going to be the way to freshen up, to innovate, to get new services on board, as well as doing the basics right? Yeah,
I think it's an important step, and to be maybe a little controversial for a second, I think the fintech partnerships are an acknowledgement from the likes of RBS, Barclays, that on their own they can't keep pace with customer demand. So fintech partnerships are critical to bridge that gap and keep pace with market demand. So you almost get into a two-speed IT model, where the bank's core IT services are ensuring stability of service, reliable operations. The fintechs are then providing the innovative ways of working, new channels, new ways to consume and new ways to engage. Those two together, paired well, I think provide a great customer experience.
We'll try and get more into the practicality of how this works as we go along. But traditionally, obviously, advice and guidance has always taken place in a face-to-face environment way back when. But the millennial customer, as well as us selfie lovers, now bank on their mobiles. We're now going to look at where the opportunities lie for offering the customer value in a digital landscape. Before we do focus on the millennial customer, it's worthwhile remembering that not all of staff and customers are comfortable with digital channels in the same way perhaps as your customers are, and keeping pace is difficult. So how do you connect up the people working in the organisation and the people outside? Stephen, how do you start to build up that line of sight and using digital as a tool?
Well, our own experience when I set up the strategic transformation team 3 and a bit years ago, and we started doing experiments like putting the free Wi-Fi in the branches, and at the time we did the world's largest purchase of iPads. To the extent we ended up going to Apple's quarterly results for them to sort of present us. And one of the reasons we did that was to make an iconic statement to staff that we were keeping up with IT and coping with the fact that they had better IT in their own pocket than they had sitting on their desktop. The really interesting thing was that the colleagues found the whole blitz of IT stuff that we were giving to them, all the new apps we were launching, the hardware we were giving them, bewildering.
Yeah.
So there was a millennial component that loved it. That there was a group of Luddite, tended to be men who weren't so keen, and then a huge majority who were bewildered and actually embarrassed to say they were bewildered.
There's a very big difference between being told this is not now what you have to use and choosing your own way through.
And us realising, blimey, how the heck were we ever going to persuade customers that digital was the answer, and to feel confident using digital if colleagues weren't confident. And what came out of that was the creation of the Digital Eagles that started with 19 people I had seconded. We're now up to 30,000, 15,000 in the UK, where they went out and sat person to person, sitting with people with their own phones saying, let me just help you. This had all come around Christmas 3 years ago, when we'd been talking about how interesting it was that grandparents would adopt technology from the grandchild, not from the child. The child wouldn't have patience. And so it was the idea of creating those grandchildren who would go out, and it grew and grew, and the colleagues became confident. They started doing incredible things, reaching out into the community, running all of the things that they did. And Jason was involved. That's how we met each other, as one of the early interventions we did with a fintech startup that Jason was involved in then.
So Jason, were you the grandfather or the grandson?
Oh no,
he was an uncle.
Yeah. Oh, that's really nice.
But you know, the principle was very sound, and it was based in the real world, which was connect up those dots. Really try to get the best possible way for people within and without to work together.
Yeah, I mean, I know Ashok has said on a variety of occasions that we're going through a massive societal shift, you know, one that has just not been seen, and we're just arguably starting along the journey. And it's a shift that's not affecting everyone at the same time. So that, you know, one of your neighbours can be living a completely non-digital life, quite happily watching the TV, reading books, catching the bus to work, fine. And on the other side, you've got Netflix, Uber, Spotify, you know, someone living an entirely different life. I don't think we've ever seen quite a shift that affects so many different parts of society so differently, both in the workplace, at home, entertainment, banking, you name it. So it does create a smear, a very different marketplace of heterogeneous sort of groups that see things and act very differently and want very different things.
We've probably seen that curve that shows the early adoption, the established user, and then at the end is the people trailing behind. And you know, essentially, we're still on that curve going up, because, and so it's difficult to have a one size fits all. There is no one size fits all. So spreading yourself so thin is very, very difficult. But how do you start to allow your organisation to be that flexible that you can stretch across that curve, Rob, and be quick to respond, but also let the people who aren't digitally savvy, just don't care about the computer, let's be honest.
It's even deeper than that. I think it's not just doesn't care about it, but you know, we've seen some of our research that people come into branches and we think, you know, come use this iPad over here, or use this automated machine, because of course that's what we're trying to do, is get low value transactions out of the branch. It's the best way of saying it. But we find people saying, I don't want to use that because I know that's your job. And so all this work we've done over the years of building these relationships and building the trust and doing that is now almost sometimes backfiring a bit, right? Because people don't want to just do that. So I think the self-serve, certainly from a bank perspective, that's nirvana, right? That's what we'd love everyone to just to turn some machines on and don't bother us. But it is quite tricky. I think there's a generation piece. There's different channels people prefer, and then I think also it's very situational as well. So if I just want to do a payment, that's fine. But when I have a problem, right? So I don't want to be on a mobile phone with a problem. I want to be in front of somebody that can help me. So it's back to your point. How do you do that? Is very complex.
But again, self-serve, which is you know, incredibly important to early adopters, perhaps less important, certainly at critical points. It's more important to have some kind of discretion, some kind of interaction.
I mean, I'd say I almost bristle a little against self-serve, because it almost sounds like we're not going to do anything. You do it yourself. And actually, because I think that we've got on one hand, you've got high net worth individuals who are, heading off to this meet their private banker, having their nice cup of coffee and talking about the cricket, but are being given the most sort of high end personalised service. On the other end, you've got the kind of mass market. Here's your print out your statement. Here's your card. Like, don't call us. We're good. And actually, I feel that digital allows us to deliver that level of service, the high net worth private banker, to everyone. So rather than it being self-service, it's actually it's a higher level of service than has arguably ever been given in mass market banking before, but automated through technology, through digital services. I think that's the tweak.
It democratises it almost. It allows access.
It's best of both.
Yeah,
it's super cheap and arguably much better.
Okay, let's talk. We have a lot to cover, so let's go down the mobile route for a moment. How important is mobile? Is clearly very important, but adding value, getting a really good service, adding that sort of that blue chip service to everybody. How important is mobile in that mix and access and so on and so forth?
Yeah, I think building on Jason's point, I think it's absolutely key. I think for, the explosion of mobile in banking is well known and well documented.
Yeah.
When you dig into it and say, well, how are people engaging on mobile? It's primarily for simple tasks, isn't it? It's account balance checking, it's payment transfers. So one could say mobile's well established. I would say we're still at a very early stage. And I think the opportunity to really add true value via mobile with converged services, that's the really exciting bit we're at now. And I think, the possibility to enrich our lives, value-added services, whether it's video or whether it's as simple as me being able to take a picture of a bill and it's automatically paid, or a picture of a check and it's automatically deposited.
Really don't want to retrace old ground because it's something that's talked about. We talk about all the time. So, practically, how do we get mobile integrated? How do we make it a really useful tool? Stephen, you mentioned obviously the iPads and the Eagles are there using them, but what's at the heart of going mobile, being able to choose the way you interact with your bank? What is that little magic formula?
I think I'd like to hope that we're getting there with that. I mean, we learn all the time. We've had mobile check imaging for 2 years. That there are other things that we'll pick up from other banks and learn what they're doing. I think at the heart of it, it has to be relevant and special to the customer. Otherwise, it will just become a utility like looking at the weather forecast each morning. And we have to be more than that. You might choose one weather forecast more than another, but it has to be embedded in things that are relevant to the customer. Whether it's purchasing something, that you make that a lot easier than anybody else could. It has to be, we have to rise up out of this transactional only world and make ourselves embedded in being used. One of the really interesting things to me has been with the mobile banking. We've got more than 5 million customers now in mobile banking. Around 1 million of those go in twice a day at least. That's incredible. We're up at sort of social media level of active users, and yet we're a transactional institution. So we're not doing advertising, we're not doing any of that. All of the other social media channels that would have equivalent usage profiles and that volume users would be doing advertising alongside that.
So it's becoming incredibly useful a couple of times a day at least. Rob,
sorry, I just think it's sort of a transition from what we said earlier about how the large banks see the world. They see their sort of products and transactions, right? So the mobile 1.0 is really about just taking that and sticking it on the small screen, digitizing it. So I think what's interesting now is to see some of the Mondos, the sort of other people that are kind of coming at a completely different angle, and the big banks need to look at that to say, this is not coming from a transaction level. This is coming from a way of life level, or a decision I need to make. And then you're going to see the numbers really shoot up, right? Because if you're just checking your transactions twice a day, then imagine if you're really getting some other value add that was tied together with that.
But through that transactional, that bedrock, that stuff that you got right, and the access in, the door is open. So where do you? So Jason, where do you then take that? There are new services. There are many services out there already. Video chat is one of those, and Barclays 24/7 up there offering video chat. And that would have been unheard of as a practical, efficient idea a few years ago. Far too labour intensive, surely, but it's starting to work and it's starting to get a great reception. So, taking that abstract, almost that lateral view, is that possible, Jason? I mean, is it really practical, or do you have to do a lot of selling to make that happen?
I think I don't think of it. My brain doesn't grab it in that way. I think how traditionally we may have seen things in particular groups of financial products, as we've said, credit cards, bank accounts, whatever. I think we'll find our way towards a new grouping. So for instance, the moment of purchase, is a great point to, like, do you need to borrow money for that? Are you saving for that? How are you sending the money across? How are you, transferring ownership if we're getting to blockchain territory? There's a whole host of sort of traditional financial services you'd get from all kinds of different places. But at the moment of purchase, that will be a key point at which a variety of these things will happen. So there are it may be that we used to think of things as credit cards and accounts, and now actually they'll be a part of the bank, and the only thing that they focus on is point of purchase. And someone else will focus on getting from monthly paycheck to monthly paycheck, because that's like a big job. It's like managing that monthly cycle. And how does that work? Well, sometimes big bills come. Maybe you need to lend, to borrow. Maybe there's an annual bill and a quarterly bill and a monthly bill, and so you need to work out all of those kinds of things. But I think we'll end up finding ourselves towards more sort of behavioural points in our lives. It'll be organised around our life rather than a traditional financial commodity product.
Yeah. And it's the bank moving to more of a proactive model, isn't it, with the customer? So it's that advice and guidance, to your point, around point of purchase or that life event, and the bank providing that proactive communication rather than the customer having to approach the bank.
Yeah.
So it's almost, we're coming the other way around.
Arguably the bank could become invisible because it's there everywhere, but at the right point, like that great waiter. You go to do something, and if you happen to need your bank, it's integrated in there somewhere. Or if you happen to want to know, can I afford to go on that holiday? Your bank, it's a mere swipe away. Yeah. But it's a very different organisation than I have an app that lists insurance and mortgages, and I have to go and find it rather than it being there when I need it.
And now, to use your analogy, bring it back again, the butler. Now we're coming to that point where the butler is ready to pounce and get in there when they're needed, but not offering you a cream cake every 5 minutes. So, far too long in that analogy. So, and that is what we as customers want. You then start to navigate privacy issues. You start to navigate our suspicion. You still need to work on trust. But once you're there, I guess now, Stephen, that's where you can really start to build a relationship.
And I think it's how you use that trust. When you were just talking, you remind me, one of the things we did with the iPads was iBeacons, that we had loads of consultants coming saying, you must use iBeacons, they're the hot thing. The problem with iBeacons in a physical environment is they're probably quite creepy in banks, because as you walk in, you don't really want a big board flashing up saying, hi Stephen, lovely to see you. In the US you might, but in the UK they're people more reserved. But for particular types of customers, so for disabled customers, they do want to be recognised without having to put their hand up saying, I'm blind, come and help me. So what we did do was an app that sat on the mobile banking where the customer identified their disability and said, I want to be treated in this way. So that as they come into the branch, it pops up a photo of the customer on the iPad with, I want to be treated in this way. Not that we've said you're blind and so this is what has to happen. So I think the use of digital where you can do it in that nice way, where you give the customer the power to decide, the same way with the customer with their data, where they say, actually, I would like you to use my data in this way, or I want my data delivered in this way. I think that's a huge opportunity.
It's really interesting because that is a very natural and clever way to fit my lifestyle, no matter what my lifestyle is. And it's not intrusive, it's actually just very genuinely helpful. And it's taken a step back from the day job, from the products you offer out, and to what you would like to see in the street. And those simple sounding services like e-signatures, offering that, what can that start to do? Just offering that level of trust, that level of easy access to a secure service. What can that do for banks if they haven't adopted them already?
Yeah, I think e-signature may be a basic function. We may view it as a basic function, but I think it's a key function. If you think of it as part of certain products or so on, without e-signature and a digital process may break down if you're then requiring a wet signature on a piece of paper.
The e-signature is an interesting example. What we went through, because what a startup would do is look and say, what does the end customer want? Well, the end customer wants a loan instantly. What they don't want to do is go through some 2-day process and things like that. So starting at what the customer wants, you say, how do I get to instant? Well, you don't even have an e-signature. So you go back and you check and you say, do you really need a physical signature, or can you just have a tick box that says, I agree to these terms and conditions, as long as you've identified the customer correctly? You'll find in most of the processes, you don't need a physical signature. There are a few that we found where they're governed by some legislation that's quite hard to unwind. Most of those, though, the bank can decide to take a risk that you don't need. It isn't that you're going to go to prison. It's just the risk sits with the bank rather than the customer. So it's almost like when people do a workflow, like digital workflow, and you think all you're doing is digitizing a crappy paper process. The thing you should do is just look at how you destroy the original process. So
back to the beginning.
We do e-signatures across a number of them, but those were we realise now a load of those were sort of interim to just destroying the existing process.
Jason, lots of nodding there. Just tie that up for us. I mean, that is a simple example of how very natural thinking about the customer, with the customer in mind, can start to make a difference.
Sure, and I think that thinking, that kind of understanding that digital now brings real-time, intelligent, contextual, connected, supercomputers, a few years ago, connected together, in a ubiquitous network, suddenly means that you can go back to the start to say whether it's a customer process, whether it's a back office process, whether it's some kind of reporting or transfer between banks, or there are so many points at which actually knowledge and experience and decades of cultural and process can work against you, because it can be just to go back to the kind of how complete are we on that curve. We're 1% done. We're not 98% done sort of polishing. We're not even started. So I think that's when you've got 24 million customers and you're running this thing at scale, doing that kind of like rethinking at every point. That's a big ask. That's like a big problem.
Okay, well, as we've heard, banks need to reimagine the relationship with the customer, and whether that's in partnership, whether that's within, that's up to each bank to decide. But with the chance to deepen personalisation, the industry needs to also be able to use the tide of that new customer data to better understand the people that they serve. So what levels of personalisation will the customer expect, will I expect in the future? Personalisation, look, I mean, we've talked about it. How many times have you uttered that word? But what is personalisation, do you think about, Stephen, in the end?
A really lovely example that isn't necessarily digital, but it gives it personalised debit cards. So this is where you put, you decide what photo you want on the front of your debit card. And it was a big fuss when we first did them, and people said, blimey, it's going to cost a load more money per card and everything. But it easily pays for itself because people pull that card out of their wallet first because they like to show the picture of their dog or their cat or their kids or whatever it is. It's a really simple example. Another one was the one I gave you earlier about the app for disabled customers, so that they can personalise things like that. There's huge opportunities to do things that aren't creepy. It can't be the cream cake waiter guy. It has to. We've said in anything that we do, even the most boring thing, if it's paying a gas bill online, or whether it's going to branch, you want the customer to walk away with a smile on their face.
Yeah, absolutely.
And hopefully you've done that not because they're laughing because it's so rubbish what you've done, but because you've done it in some way that distinguishes you. Otherwise, you're a utility.
Yeah.
But we're race to doing nice-looking utility websites. So that's what it means.
Absolutely. On the front of my credit card would be my credit card. That'd be a fascinating thing to say. But Darren, what does personalisation? What would personalisation, that great personalised journey, what would it really look like in the bank that starts to really become, again, back to our first point, not necessarily the best friend, but a trusted advisor?
Yeah.
What does that personalised journey look like?
I think Jason started to hint at it earlier. I mean, for me, it's the utopia, if you like, is the bank that I never have to reach out to. You know, I think that's probably the goal that we're chasing. And it may be a little creepy, but you know, the bank connecting into my social media, you know, seeing the picture I've posted of my newborn baby, which my wife tells me is going to be the happiest moment of my life.
Congratulations.
Still debating that one.
Yeah.
But you know, the point is, you know, based on that event, they can start to provide, you know, products and services that make sense. Maybe it's a car loan for the inevitable MTV I have to purchase, or you know, life insurance or something along those lines. So, I think it is striking that balance between, you know, creepy and intrusive, and true value add. But I think that utopia is the bank I never have to reach out to. It's proactive in its nature.
But that partner, that life partner, if you will, is something that you can still control. You can still have a bit of, you can still work with that person, and they can be the protector and the guardian, but also then facilitate a lot of what you do. As long as you have that, what I used to use as an escape button, you press that, then you start. Then you at least you can say that's enough. Thank you very much. And so, but use of data. How important is better use of data? I mean, clearly it's a conversation again we have a lot, but let's really focus on how data can be better used to make customers happy and to build that relationship that really is natural. What do you think, first of all, Stephen? How can data be better used?
I think it's one of the key pillars of the future of the bank. We use or process vast amounts of data that we don't put to use for the benefit of customers. We've started doing experiments with that. We've created a business unit that just focuses on information, and we've put some of those things out there. Anybody can just key up and look at the Barclays Local Insights that takes all of the local transactional information. It's personalised. There's a similar one that we do for businesses now that will tell you, business like yours, this is how they transact things. There's incredible opportunities.
Rob?
Yeah, I think about sort of personalization on one side, data on the other side. So if you mesh the two together, you know, the normal way a bank would approach it is, I've got this data and I know who you are, and now I'm going to start selling you some more things. So that's kind of ring one, we'll call it, right? But there's actually much more interesting and much more value added to the customer is the second ring maybe, which is around, so an example might be, my father's got dementia. I know that if he goes with his debit card outside of this 5-mile ring, I'd like to receive a text message. And so if you imagine all this sort of traffic is coming back through the bank, back to your data point, you know, there's so much data that's sort of sitting there, it's not being used. So that if my bank offered me that, that's understanding me and I'm able to personalize that to my needs, but then it's using that data to give me a very value-added service that nothing to do with banking. So you think of the sort of the trust feedback of that one little simple thing. So I think there's, you know, between all of us, we could think of probably 50 things that are in that ring that are sort of non-banking but very value-added to customers.
Let's be perfectly honest, it is a lovely utopia. It's a great idea, it's a perfect environment, but actually sales still need to happen, customers still need to be kept and onboarded and so on and so forth. So realistically, where's the balance? It has to be useful for both sides, not just the customer. Jason, you know, where is that balance? Is it almost training the team, the staff, having the, you know, again, the boardroom approval, having a really good attitude to customers throughout the organisation?
I'm not sure it's a balance. I think that they're connected. I think providing amazing services to customers brings more customers, and with the right cost base and the ability to deliver against that creates a more and more profitable business. So I guess I'm I would question that whether you have to worry about selling something or providing an amazing service. I think that they're connected.
One will happen.
Yeah,
It's totally true. It's just difficult then necessarily to get that move through the organisation every single day of the week.
It's a cultural change in large organisations is phenomenally difficult when the organisation, its reward remuneration, the organisation chart, the processes, systems, everything is built around arguably the previous commodity financial products paradigm. And that's, I think lots of people talk about legacy IT systems as being a problem, but I think that actually culture is a big issue in terms of doing that kind of thing.
Final question, really. It's time for audience questions. We won't be long before we come to you and your fantastic insights for us, but what's the great advantage? What is the fundamental advantage or disadvantage of not using data to gain insight, to gain a better customer experience? What will happen if that's not followed through and that the entire organisation doesn't get it?
Yeah, I mean, I think we can predict the end result quite easily. I mean, if you look at the retail market, how that is driving up customer expectations within banking. If we fail to adapt and meet customer needs, customers will go elsewhere. And I think, account switching rates right now are very low, right? 2% maybe. I think we're at a tipping point now, where we're going to see that really start to increase at a phenomenal rate. And I think those that don't adapt, will risk customer attrition, and they're standing in the market as a result.
Okay, it's been so far a very detailed discussion, and we hope you found the insights from our panel helpful so far. Many of you will be based a long way from where we are in London at the moment, and I'd like to share your comments wherever you may be in the world and your experiences with us now as we spend the last 14 minutes going through your questions and your comments for us. We have some here, we have some through to my screen, so let's hear from you. Throughout the discussion, we've been asking you to get in touch on the webpage right here, or through the Twitter hashtag banking16, that's banking16. So let's listen to some of these now. Let's go to my screen here first of all. And Alvin Lim, thank you, Alvin. You are Head of Direct at HSBC. Thanks for getting in touch with us. Now, fast forward to the next 10 years, what role should banks be to the consumer? Almost to our first question earlier on. Financial product provider, trusted identity holder, middleman for payments. So look, thank you, Alvin, that's very nice. You've gone to the sort of fairly contained practitioner, facilitator. Rob, what do you think about this? There are three options here from Alvin. Financial product provider, trusted identity holder, middleman for payments. What would you prefer to be, apart from the butler?
Ooh, I wouldn't have said any of those, but I mean...
Okay. Well, that's
sorry.
good. Well, why is that? Yeah. What would you rather be?
I think that's what we've been talking about today, is sort of as this intersection of, and a keeper of the trusted holding of all your transactions and basically your life, if you think about it.
Yeah.
I think the banks need to be moving towards how am I adding value-added services that are, surrounding that life. So if I'm a small startup, I mean, cash flow is my problem, right? So everyone says that when they start a company, cash flow is your number one problem. So do we ever show anybody what their cash flow is? So why isn't that automated and with an alert saying, your cash flow is going to run out in 10 days? You have an invoice coming in. Why don't you take 80% of that? So that if I had that as a small business, I'd be ecstatic. So that's playing with the data and understanding the customer. So I think we have to build the trusted advisor, but we need to start to kind of step into from the customer view.
Yeah, it all comes back to who is your customer, what is their problem, and what tools, capabilities, assets do you have in order to solve those problems.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people put technology and digital at the front. What are we doing with data? What are we doing with mobile? And it's actually, that's background. Yeah. They're tools to serve that end customer, whoever they are. There was a great story about the CEO of Target starting to visit his customers' houses, like to go out and see, can you show me your cupboard where you keep the food? And actually to understand that more makes the business better. How many traditional financial services firms like really get customers' lives, really talk to customers.
There's another question from HSBC here. I'm tempted to ask that straight away. Let's split the panel. So, Cheryl Yo, thank you very much. You're an associate at HSBC. Now, this is a tough question, but we'll ask it anyway. How much of a threat are fintech startups in the banking industry, if at all? Disruption. Fintech startups. I mean, I know it's a difficult one to answer, but surely the health of an ecosystem needs new life, new ideas, and the existing platforms. What do you think, Dan?
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, I see it as something that's complementary. So is it a risk? No, I don't think so. I think, you know, the fintech partnerships and the technology that's out there is the enabler. But I think, you know, to Jason's point, what we can't miss though is walking that customer journey. You know, understanding their needs, understanding the outcome that they're chasing, and then utilizing technology to fit that. I think the danger, if there is one, of fintech partnerships, and I see this in some organizations, they're getting too caught up in the shiny things. You know, this is cool technology. Okay, yeah, great, but you know, what problem does that actually solve for the customer?
Stephen, you brought a lot of shiny things into Barclays, but to solve
they're not shiny.
but to solve a problem, and to draw people closer together.
The thing with the fintech, so you can have a whole range of what a partnership means. So you can have some that you just work with, you don't invest in, you just learn from them. I think they're a very good thing for the industry in that they shake us up a bit and get us to think differently. I also reflect exactly the same as you. There seem to be some mad ones out there, and you think, why has someone invested a load of money into them? Because there isn't a problem that they're solving. That what they're doing is a technically interesting solution to something that doesn't seem to have a real life problem. And I'm amazed the amount of money that's gone into fintech. But it's that the whole thing is very good, and I think we have to be broad-minded and open-minded and pick out the best things that we can find out there. That they add huge value.
Okay, thank you very much. Lobato Martin, thank you very much for getting in touch with us, your data quality manager at Santander. Your question is, what kind of services would provide value-added profits in the SME market? Interesting, right? Rob, do you fancy that one?
Sure. A few ideas on that one. I think back to what kind of value-added services. So again, I think we need to walk in the shoes a bit. So I was doing an example one time. We were doing some brainstorming about problems that companies would face. So I right away said, well, they have an FX problem, you know, foreign exchange problem. And a couple people in the room said, no, that's a corporate problem. And I said, really? So you're a small company here and you sell some goods in Netherlands, and you now have to invoice in euros. You've got to deal with foreign exchange gains and losses. So I think the SMEs are fairly simple beasts, really, and they've been pretty neglected actually over the last 10 years. Everyone's sort of focused on personal, private, and big corporates. So they really only have sort of 5 or 10 real problems. Cash flow management is critical. Taxes, accounting. So I mean, you can kind of walk around the circle, and I think that's the sort of, if I was sort of plugging in things, I'd have a circle with some key value-added services around there. Yeah.
As an SME, I would agree with you. Let's move on. We've got more questions to come. So let's go to my screen here, which is showing Dave Crow. Thank you, Dave, for writing to us today. Your strategy practitioner at Virgin Money. How do you see PSD2 and open banking standards changing the traditional role of the bank? Okay, PSD2. We haven't, Jason.
Yeah, I think there's a really interesting point here around whether banks will kind of grasp the nettle and become platforms. To be able to curate, to be able to offer services, to be able to make that part of their thing, or whether they're relegated and become pipes. It's platforms or it's pipes. And I did some sort of consulting a long time ago in the telco space. They had exactly the same, questions. Handsets coming along, how do we add value? How do we, keep in front of the end customer? And I think that's part of the problem now. It's you can decide to be a behind the scenes infrastructure bank, I don't think anyone wants to go there.
Yeah.
So it becomes, how do you keep that contact with end customers and don't get disintermediated by new players who come along with a nice shiny interface? And so being able to provide the best of all of this disaggregated financial services marketplace, while at the same time having a RBS, a Mondo, Barclays, heading there, is really the question. And that takes a lot of work.
Yeah. Okay, one more question. I think maybe two. Natalia Monvoisa, I hope that's your name. Head of voice of the customer. At Metro Bank. Head of voice of the customer at Metro Bank. What can banks learn from telecoms organisations when it comes to innovation with technology? Now we've already heard you, that came through just before Jason's comment. Any other thoughts on telcos? Because there was so much movement in the telco space.
I think one movement, the big change for me in the telcos was really around kind of bundled pricing, or so. If you remember the bad old days, you took your telephone out, you went around Europe, and you came home, and then when the bill came in, you kind of opened it like that, because it could have been £700 or £50. You had no idea. And I think sometimes the banking world now is a bit like that. So I mean, just getting very straightforward pricing that's not confusing everybody is worth it.
I think there's something interesting as well with app stores. So whether it's the Android version of sort of Wild West or the kind of the heavily curated, we'll look after you kind of iPhone, how you take one device or one service and end up delivering multiple services or different things is interesting, and actually ties back to the PSD2 question.
One more question, very briefly. It could be a yes answer, it could be a no answer. From Jai Sandiford, who wrote into us before the webinar today, social media operations at Bendigo and Adelaide Bank. We want to be in the consumer's world, so how important is partnering? I promise we'll come back to it, it's at the very end. Darren, give us what you think about that. How important is partnering, and I guess with the right people as a provider?
Yeah, I think again it's critical. We talked about it earlier, that kind of two-speed IT model.
Yeah.
I think the partnerships and enable the banks to accelerate their ability to serve customers and give them a great experience. So I think picking the right partnerships to solve the right challenges for the customer is what's key.
Selection here, Stephen, is very, very key. You need to share those values, be almost part of that same organisation, but with these new ideas, so they don't get spoilt by being subsumed into.
A big challenge for us was learning how to, as a big organisation, how we interact with what are often tiny little organisations, so everyone feels equal and loved. And it comes down to emotional stuff, not to contract and legal stuff. And you have to be really get the people behaving in a very different way. I mean, we've got 320 years of learning how to be a big, bossy, large company. And you've got to learn to behave in a very different way so that you both get something good out of the outcome.
And then the results, Darren, of course, will be positive, because you're going to start to look at the consumer, the customer, and start to flip that view around, which is already happening clearly from what we've heard today. Yeah. That's the most important thing, really, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. I think it becomes a win-win scenario. You're providing an improved level of service to the customer, but you're improving your own internal operations. So whether that's cutting costs, ensuring stronger compliance, that's what drives the win-win result.
Okay, well, I hope you've really enjoyed the past hour. We've got through a lot, and it's provided some useful advice to use, some practical tips to help you in preparing for the future of value-added services at your banking organisation. Thanks for sending in your comments, your questions. Sorry that we couldn't get to them all, as always, but please do give us your feedback on the webinar by filling in the form, which should be appearing around about here on the right-hand side of your screen at the moment. We value your opinion, we really do, so let us know what you thought of today's discussion, and we will react in the best possible way and look at the customer as the heart of our business. So as we've heard over the last hour, value-added services have the ability to truly engage customers and create much more long-lasting, genuine and natural relationships. But the challenge now lies in utilising emerging technologies in the right way and making sure that you are in the position to turn that data into really meaningful insight. Well, we hope you'll be able to join us at one of Market Force's upcoming events that will look at some of the challenges and the solutions in more detail. We're running a conference on customer engagement in banking, which we really hope to see you at. You can find out more at www.marketforce.eu.com. Well, for now, many thanks to our panel today for taking part and to Kofax from Lexmark for supporting the webinar. Couldn't do it without you. And, of course, you too couldn't do this without you watching, sending in your comments and your questions and giving us some feedback. We'll see you next time. All the best until then. Take care.